The moon is the closest thing to us in the entire universe. It's been hanging in our sky for 4.5 billion years. We've walked on it. We've driven a car on it. We've hit golf balls on it. And in over half a century since the last human left, nobody has gone back to stay. There's a reason for that. Because the question isn't whether we can reach the moon. We already know we can. The question is whether we can survive there. And the answer is far stranger than you'd expect. Let's start with why the moon wants you dead. There's no air. Not a little air, essentially none. The moon has what scientists call an exosphere, which is so thin that the individual atoms almost never bump into each other. If you stepped outside without a suit, you wouldn't suffocate slowly. The pressure difference would make the moisture on your tongue and eyes boil away in seconds. Then there's the temperature. In direct sunlight, the surface reaches around 127 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to boil water twice over. In the shade, it plunges to minus 173. Those two extremes can exist just feet apart, because with no atmosphere, there's nothing to spread the heat around. And it stays that way for a while. A single lunar day lasts about 14 Earth days. Then comes 14 Earth days of total darkness and brutal cold. Any equipment you leave up there has to survive 2 weeks of deep freeze, over and over again, forever. Then there's the radiation. Earth has two invisible shields, a thick atmosphere and a powerful magnetic field. Together, they deflect the constant stream of high-energy particles pouring out of the sun and the wider galaxy. The moon has neither. When China's Chang'e 4 lander measured surface radiation in 2019, it recorded levels roughly 2 to 3 times what astronauts absorb on the International Space Station. And the ISS is still partly protected by Earth's magnetic field. The moon isn't. A single large solar flare, with no warning and nowhere to hide, could be lethal. So far, this sounds hopeless. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the moon is also hiding some very useful secrets. The first one is water. For decades, everyone assumed the moon was bone dry. Then, in 2009, NASA deliberately crashed a rocket stage into a crater near the lunar South Pole and analyzed the plume of debris it kicked up. There was water in it. Actual water ice. It turns out that certain craters near the moon's poles are so deep and the sun sits so low on the horizon there that parts of their floors have never seen sunlight. Not once. Not in billions of years. These are called permanently shadowed regions, and they sit at around minus 240 degrees Celsius, some of the coldest places in the entire solar system. And they're full of ice. Estimates run into the hundreds of millions of tons. Water isn't just for drinking. Split it apart, and you get hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen to breathe. Hydrogen and oxygen together make rocket fuel. Suddenly, the moon isn't just a destination. It's a gas station. The second secret is even weirder. The moon is already full of oxygen. Lunar soil is roughly 40 to 45% oxygen by weight. It's just chemically locked into the rocks and dust as oxides. Researchers have already demonstrated ways to extract it in a lab. Feed the soil enough energy, and it gives up the oxygen it's been holding for billions of years. The third secret is location. Right near the South Pole, there are mountain ridges that sit high enough to catch almost continuous sunlight. They've been nicknamed the peaks of eternal light. A solar array up there wouldn't have to survive a 2-week night. It could just keep generating power. And within walking distance of those peaks are the shadowed craters holding the ice. Endless power next door to endless water. It's about as close to a perfect address as the moon has. The fourth secret is underground. Orbiting spacecraft have spotted deep pits scattered across the lunar surface. Some of them appear to be collapsed ceilings of ancient lava tubes, hollow tunnels carved out when molten rock flowed beneath the surface billions of years ago. Because of the moon's low gravity, these tubes can be enormous. Some estimates suggest they could be hundreds of meters wide and run for kilometers. Underground, everything gets easier. The rock overhead blocks radiation. It blocks micrometeorites, and the temperature stops swinging wildly and settles at a stable -20 or so. A lunar base probably doesn't look like a shiny glass dome. It looks like a cave. So the moon has water, oxygen, power, and shelter. That covers survival. But there's one problem nobody has solved: the human body. The moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, and we genuinely do not know what that does to a person over months or years. We know what zero gravity does because astronauts have been living in it for decades. Bones weaken, muscles shrink, fluid shifts toward the head and presses on the eyes, permanently changing some astronauts' vision. The immune system gets sluggish. But 1/6 gravity isn't zero. It might be enough to prevent the worst of it, or it might not be. Nobody has ever stayed long enough to find out. The longest anyone ever spent on the lunar surface was about 3 days. And then there's the dust. This one surprised everybody. Lunar dust is nothing like the sand on Earth. There's no wind or water to wear it smooth, so every particle stays jagged and sharp, like microscopic broken glass. It's also electrostatically charged, which means it clings to absolutely everything. Apollo astronauts tracked it back into the lander on their suits. It got into the seals. It scratched their visors. Harrison Schmitt breathed it in and developed what he called lunar hay fever, congestion and irritation that took hours to fade. Nobody knows what breathing that stuff every day for a year would do to a set of lungs. The early guesses aren't encouraging. Food is the last piece, and we've made progress there that almost nobody talks about. In 2019, Chang'e 4 carried a sealed container of cotton seeds to the far side of the moon. One of them sprouted. It became the first plant ever to grow on another world. It died when the lunar night arrived and the container froze, but it proved the concept. Then in 2022, researchers at the University of Florida did something remarkable. They planted seeds in actual lunar soil brought back by the Apollo missions. Precious material, decades old, a few grams at a time. The plants grew. They didn't grow well. They were stunted and stressed and showed signs of struggling against the soil chemistry. But they grew. Life from Earth can take root in the ground of another world. So, can the moon sustain human life? Not on its own. Not the way Earth does. The moon will never be a place you can walk outside and breathe. It will never have weather or oceans or a sky. But that was never really the question. The real question is whether the moon has enough raw material for humans to build their own life support out of what's already there. Water from the shadows, oxygen from the dirt, power from the peaks, shelter from the caves. And the honest answer, based on everything we've learned in the last 20 years, is probably yes. NASA's Artemis program is aiming to put humans back on the lunar surface in the coming years. And this time, the goal isn't footprints. It's a permanent presence at the South Pole, right where the ice is. We spent 50 years thinking the moon was a dead rock we'd already finished with. We were wrong. We just hadn't looked in the right places yet. If you want more like this, hit subscribe. There's a whole universe left to unveil.